Hello and welcome to episode 63 of the Star Bros podcast. We are coming to you right after the holidays. We hope you all had a wonderful holiday yourself. And, we'll talk about some of ours a little bit more later. But thank you for joining us as always. I am joined, as always, by my bro host, Jan Solo.
And I'm joined by my bro host, who?
You blah, blah, blah.
My bro host, Ben Skywalker.
The holidays have not been nice to either of us, have they?
But I think we'll be okay.
We'll be fine.
We'll soldier on.
We had some good holidays, I'd say. We
Sure.
were kind of texting back and forth. I know that you have been busy and have a lot going on, but how are yours? How festive were they?
Very festive. So we stayed home for Christmas and had a very quiet Christmas, but it was a happy one and it was a very relaxing one. And I think we needed a little bit of recharge time, like a lot of people do around this time. So we got some of that, which was nice.
Very good.
I have a couple of Star Wars gifts that I have to show you at some point, and one of them I told you about, but you've seen before. I got one of those Squatch Star Wars soap sets.
Yes, I want to smell them.
With right, absolutely. With 4 different soaps. There's Rey, Luke, but it's the Last Jedi Luke.
Oh,
interesting choice.
Wait, is it like a different color? Like what? How do they make it Last Jedi?
There's a picture of his face on it.
Okay. So it is
that era of Luke.
Okay, got it. Following, I'm with you.
And then Palpatine and Kylo Ren. Those are the soaps.
I'd be really nervous about using that Palpatine one. Like, do you turn into a Sith? Do you get influenced by the dark side?
We're about to find out.
I'll see what version I get of you.
Yes, but they all kind of they all smell similar. The main difference is how gritty the soap is.
Oh, okay.
So Rey, no grit. Palpatine, high grit.
So that's the scale.
Yeah.
Where's Luke on that?
Intermediate grit.
Closer to Rey or Palpatine?
I don't think that's the term. But I was thinking, I was like, well, why wouldn't Rey be as gritty, or at least 50% as gritty as Palpatine?
Right? All this is making me think of is Gritty from Flyers. Now, sorry. That's where the other half of my brain goes.
Fair enough. But how about you? Nice Christmas?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you forgot one of your presents.
Yes. So I'll tweet a picture of it. But
yes,
one of my main gifts was my wife had a cartoon portrait made of me as Han Solo or Jan Solo in Bright Tree Village, where the Ewoks live.
Because you love Ewoks.
I do love Ewoks.
Yes,
you helped out with this.
I did.
You were a consultant. You were an expert consultant when my wife.
Jess and I were probably texting for about an hour, trying to figure out what this should look like, and like
you want to get it right.
At first I was thinking Han, so I put you in front of like the Millennium Falcon and the Bay and stuff. But then I went, wait a minute, and I thought of like the scene specifically from Return of the Jedi, and like that feels more like your milieu.
Wow.
How's that for a French word?
I love it. That's a good SAT word too.
Yeah, it is. That's what I go for.
But yeah, so it's me. Got my blaster out, dressed as Han Solo in Bright Tree Village with two of our cats.
Chewbucky.
If anybody listened early on in like year 1, you might have heard Chewbucky howling in the background, and so he's got his little Chewbacca's got that bandolier thing going across his chest. And then my current cat Wrigley is dressed as Wicket the Ewok. So
I like it.
Can't beat that.
I chose both of those.
Thank you for that.
But that was so cool. Jess had a great idea to get that for you and sent it over, and it just got all my juices flowing to like think of like what would be the best. Like,
you nailed it, dude. It's perfect
way to portray you in Star Wars.
And I've put it right under the TV, so as I sit and I look at the TV in the living room, I can sort of look down at this beautiful portrait.
Yes, it's so cool. That was a good one.
Love it.
I actually didn't get that many Star Wars gifts this time around. I got a little Lego set.
Cool.
The Duel on Mustafar one, which I've already put together. I that's like one of we've talked about. It's my favorite lightsaber battle, so it's nice to have a Lego set that portrays that.
Those little sets, they come together pretty quickly, don't they?
Oh, it took me like 30 minutes. It didn't take that long.
Cool.
It's like a 200-piece set, not that big.
Got it.
But put that together and put it on my shelf of other Legos.
Awesome.
And then the other one was a fork.
Huh.
And on it was inscribed, "May the fork be with you."
That's amazing. Is it just one One fork, not like a set.
Just the fork. One
Cool.
fork that says that. I ate some pie with it. It was great. It made the pie taste so much better. I'll say that.
I bet. Wow.
But yeah, that was it.
Cool.
But enough of all the fun, festive times. Why don't we get into the topic that we're here to talk about?
Yeah, we're having way too much fun, and the topic that we're going to be covering. Well, actually, we've got some fun.
We're kind of making this one on purpose because we put the fun in funeral, right?
That's the title.
That's the title. It is.
Yeah. So we figured it's the holidays, and what better time to talk about death than the holidays?
Out with the old and with the new. That's the only way that I could tie it in.
Yeah. And so we're going to be talking about a topic that we didn't feel like got a lot of discussion in the Star Wars fandom, which is death, dying, funerals, mourning, all of those things in the Star Wars galaxy.
Because there's a lot of it. Like as
There's
I prepared, I realized how much there really is of death portrayed in Star Wars. Like it's a a lot of people pass on.
A lot of people, and I sent you my outline this morning. I think like my thesis as I was putting my notes together was attitudes and philosophies about death are so consequential as themes to the Star Wars story.
Yeah.
Like just look at the conflict that Anakin experiences. That's all about death and avoiding death and the different attitudes between the Sith and the Jedi about death. But there's so much more, and we'll get into it.
And frankly, we're dealing with the topic of wars and battles and conflict within the galaxy. And when there's any of that, there's going to be death, sadly enough.
Yeah.
And or kind of gave us a really blunt way to look at it. It was like, unfortunately, this is what rebellion looks like.
Yes.
There's going to be some loss and some sacrifices that you have to make along the way. And it was true in the Clone Wars. It was true in the time of the rebellion. So, and the resistance. Like it's naturally going to be a theme that permeates the entire saga, but or the entire franchise, frankly. So we're going to dive into it and see how they deal with it.
Yeah.
But first, as always, we got to get to the news, which there isn't that much of this week, but we will still get to it anyway.
Yep.
What's that segment called? Oh, I do that one.
You do that.
I do that one. News from across the galaxy. Oh, that was the longer one.
It's a long way down that time. What do we got?
That was a long death.
Yes.
Poor guy.
Oh.
Oh, man.
Hashtag sad.
See, we really do bring the fun in funeral, guys.
Yeah.
There wasn't that much news. It's been 2 quiet weeks because Lucasfilm went on holiday as well.
Good for them.
As they should.
Yeah.
But there were a couple of pieces to react to. One was Diego Luna, who gave an interview with Collider recently, and I just kind of caught a snippet of it. And one of the things that he was talking there was season 2 and how the format that they use for season 1 cannot carry over to season 2. And what I'm talking about specifically is the decision to make season 1 kind of a year in review for Andor and kind of his year of going from that moment where he shoots the guard to the guards until the final moment of the battle on Ferrix, and that's basically a year.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that there's 5 years in between that moment and Rogue One,
right?
So naturally, your mind would go, okay, so you can do 5 seasons of this, right? And he was very clear to say, I can't be doing this for 10 years. And it doesn't really make sense if the character that I portrayed at this age of my life and the character then trying to portray that character 20 years after that, like it just doesn't work, like leading up into it. I get where he's coming from. His other point was, oh gosh, I just forgot the Gilroy, the creator of the show, right? He can't be doing this for 10 years as well. Like eventually he wants to get onto other creative things.
For sure.
So basically he was saying, don't expect the same format. Don't expect this to be year 4 leading up to Rogue One. I think they've made it clear that after season 2, they're done.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just clarifying that, but I thought I'd get your reaction to that. Like, I mean, I would love to have 5 seasons and have every year kind of chronicled leading up into it. But I also realize it's not realistic to get that.
That's like that would have to be like the novelization of the Andor story. And like it would have to be a series of books or something. I think that's the only, and they would churn them out over like 15 years,
right?
Not over 5 years. So I'm good with that. I know that the personnel, the Gilroys and the actors and so on, the people who made that series special, I think are by and large carrying over. Mm-hmm. I trust them.
Yeah.
I trust them to tell the story however they want to tell
However, it needs to be told.
and it doesn't need to follow that formula for it to be a satisfying bridge to the Cassian Andor that we meet in Rogue One.
And if honestly, if you want to tell the story and add little shoot off points that can be turned into animated specials at some point, do it. I mean,
Yeah,
if we learned anything
sure.
from Tales of the Jedi, is like just because the actor isn't there anymore or someone is aged, like doesn't mean that you can't tell the story,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So, which is one of the blessings of having the animated stories and how well they've done with those.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I just really like I like the clarification.
Yeah,
is all I'm saying.
I'm good with that. By the way, when should we expect that? 24?
I think 24. Yeah, I think
Or
they're
maybe late
filming it
23?
now.
Okay.
Like I think they're in production now.
Can you see if they can just speed that up? Is that
Well, that's another thing that they was talking about. Like we can't speed it up. It takes
Okay.
2 years to make 12 hours or so of 10 to 12
I
hours
mean,
of content.
I thought I would ask.
I mean, I think everybody's after that season. They're on a little bit of an Andor hangover.
Yeah.
Right. That was just too good.
Yeah, no, it's coming from a place of I'm excited about it.
Yes.
Bring it on.
We all are. That was one piece of news.
Okay.
Any other reactions to that?
No, I think I'm just gonna buckle up and wait for that. I wonder. It feels like Andor, by the way, the first season was one where we got a bunch of leak photos of the sets, and things like that. I wonder if we'll get more of that this time around.
Probably. There's always something.
There's always something.
The Acolyte has already had some leaks pictures.
A bunch,
right?
A bunch.
Nothing that really gives away anything. Just
but it's fun to speculate a little bit. I like those types of. So
I'm so weary about speculation after Last Jedi and other things. Like we all learned our lesson from that, right?
And that's
right.
Yes,
right.
That's not our thing, by the way, right? Like we don't speculate. We're not here to report on rumors or things like that. But gosh, it's fun when you get like, a little shot of like somebody in costume or of the set or whatever. So I'm hoping like that to me would be satisfying between now and 2024.
I was like actively avoiding spoilers for what was it? Endgame, I remember. Because after Infinity War came out, I didn't want to know anything. I wanted to be completely surprised.
Yeah.
So there is something we said about like avoiding spoilers.
Sure.
But if it's just I want to see what does the set look like? Like that's totally cool.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
Or I remember when right before Kenobi came out, there was a shot of Ewan McGregor coming out of the makeup van or like the hair van or whatever, and he was in costume, but they did this thing where they draped them in like this black robe thing that I think it sort of looks like the thing that they throw on you at the barbershop.
Yeah.
But it completely sort of concealed their costume and stuff like that. Like I get a kick out of things like that of like not only like what do I get a peek behind the scenes, but also like how are they trying to prevent me from finding out. My other favorite one was when they were filming The Last Jedi, and the island that plays the role of Ahch-To, they had security and boats going around the island, and as reporters would come up to the island, the reporters would say like, so what's going on here? And they all said it was a BBC documentary. And that was the cover story. I think stuff like that's fun.
Because like documentary, we got other things to cover. Let's go.
Yep.
No one wants to know about spoilers for a documentary.
Nobody believed it.
No. Everybody. I know. They knew it was that. What was the name of it? It was like the Saint something, right? Like the island.
Yeah, it's like Saint
Michel or something. I don't remember. I've got
Saint Michel. Saint Michel de Milieu.
Oh my gosh. I'm not that bad. Actually, no, I am really bad with French pronunciations. I get mad at people for not this brand, but how do you pronounce the French
Polar
brand? No, a different brand. The actual French one.
Pepsi.
You're not picking up what I'm putting down, man.
Oh, La Croix.
Thank you. How do you really pronounce it though?
LaCroix.
LaCroix. So they don't even get the la right. It's not LaCroix. It's LaCroix. I'm like La Croix. Come on, people. Learn some French out there.
La Croix.
Yeah, La Croix. Yeah.
We just lost the two people in France who listen. I'm so sorry.
I say it right. I speak French. Anyway, moving on with news. Speaking of not being able or like buckling in and just waiting 2 years, you can watch some Bad Batch.
Sure. Yeah, next week. Next week you can watch it.
Yeah, January 4th.
It's wild.
That's gonna be fun. There's nothing else to say about that. We will cover that as part of the news and then do a full recap later on.
Yep.
Next piece of news. Comics. A lot of comics got released.
5.
5 in
5
1
Star Wars
week
comics this week.
because they didn't do any on Christmas.
Yeah, which
The week of Christmas.
totally fine. Took a little break.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what did you we reviewed some of them. You've
Yes.
been doing the High Republic. I've been doing Yoda.
Yes.
What are you thinking so far?
So there's a little bit of like a twist this week in the High Republic, and so this is Marvel's The High Republic Phase 2, written by Kevin Scott, art by Ario Anindito, which is a dynamite combo, by the way.
Oh yeah,
Terrific artist writer combo. And we got to meet both of them.
We did, yes.
At Comic-Con. It was really cool.
We did.
Really nice gents. But so if you've ever been curious about Jedha, about the Guardians of the Whills, and going back in time, like well before we first saw it on the big screen in, what was that, Rogue One? Rogue One.
Wait, who?
Jedha.
Jedha?
Yeah.
Yeah, Rogue One. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, who? Jedha. It's not Ego, the living planet. Come on.
It does sort of have a vibe to it and has
Yeah.
a life force about it.
Yeah.
So if you've ever been curious about what's been going on there for all these years and why is it such an important place and what's going on in the Temple of Kyber and things like that, this series is exploring that. And there's a particularly interesting new character named Tay Sirik, who I'm very curious about. And he had a little bit of a twist where, not to give too much away, but we kind of thought maybe he wasn't a good guy, and now maybe it looks like he is a really good guy and a principled good guy, and that all kind of came out this episode.
Cool.
Or this issue.
Yes.
So issue number 3 is out. If you can pick them up, issues 1, 2, and 3 are all terrific. Would highly recommend.
Cool. Yeah, I've been really liking the Yoda. So that was the third one of yours. This one was the second one of the Yoda series that I covered. It's just really interesting because it's Yoda the way you've seen him before, and kind of everything that you know about him. But there's something a little bit different about him too. Everyone's just kind of like, what was Yoda like in the middle of his life? Was he still very principled? Was he a little bit more reckless? Like, what was he like? And I'm not getting the sense that he's very different, but I am getting the sense that from reading this, he's growing a little bit weary of the lifestyle a bit.
Okay.
And I mean, think about how long he's living it. At this point, he's probably at least 600, something around that, 700. I don't know. So yeah, he's been around a while, and he's trying to help these specific people out. But the colors in it are amazing. So I'm really liking the story and where it's teasing. It's also done by Kevin Scott.
That's right.
I believe.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
Different artist though, not Ario on
Yep.
this one. But it's been pretty good so far.
Excellent.
Speaking of death, Kevin Scott really likes to throw some of that in there, but he can't touch Yoda. Like, Yoda's off limits.
That's probably one of the reassuring things about reading that particular series is that the main character is going to survive.
Yeah, exactly. But
I'm sure his heart will be broken or something like that, or
he'll break a heart somewhere. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
For sure.
So, and I feel like that's about to happen.
Oh goodness.
Anyway, again, like we said, not too much news. There's one other thing. StarWars.com put out a look back at 2022, which was really good. I highly encourage going and reading it. There was some great memories. It's just interesting reflecting on all the things that happened. Like, think about it. At the same point around this time last year, we were getting ready for Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
That was 2022.
Yeah.
So we got Book of Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, and Andor, 3 live-action series. We had Star Wars Celebration. We had us going to Comic-Con. We had the wrapping up of the High Republic Phase 1 and the launch of Phase 2.
Yeah.
We had, what else? Like, there's so much more. Oh, the Halcyon, launched at Disney World.
Yeah.
And with it was the Summer Vacation Lego special that we got.
Yep.
Tales of the Jedi.
I almost forgot about that one. Yeah.
We got a ton of good stuff this year.
A ton of great stuff. So what kind of shakes out for you as being some of your favorite stuff?
I mean, series wise, I can't believe I'm saying this in a year that Kenobi was released, but Andor was just so good. And it's not free. It's not even just like recency bias. It was literally that good, where if you compare it to the other series, it's just so different.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I don't like either of the other ones.
Good. It's good.
Just that good.
There was I think a lot of discussion on a Twitter thread recently about how good it is that there is a genuine variety in the stuff that we're getting.
Yeah.
We're getting some animated stuff, some more like cinematic on-screen stuff, and different types of, like, looking back on Boba Fett, that was kind of like a bunch of cool backstory, a ton of action, and really satisfying in those respects. But I think I'm with you. Like, loved Andor. I think that's going to stand the test of time for me.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people kind of soured on Kenobi. I love that too.
Why did they sour? It's still good.
I don't know. I think people really build stuff up in their minds, and then if it doesn't look like what they imagined, they get
Yeah,
cranky.
I mean, but then we got that epic battle between Vader and Obi-Wan again,
which is
at the end.
it's amazing.
That
That's
I'll never forget watching the Chris's reaction to that, and like, comparing it to my own reaction. It was pretty much the same thing. I was just like, what is happening? Like, I was almost crying with it.
Yeah.
Like, very moving, very good.
It was so
action.
moving. And there was a bunch of moments in that series that I found like genuinely emotionally moving.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you get hit back to back with all these different shows, like sometimes there is the recency bias. You do sort of like focus on whatever you've got now, and this is like a good time to look back and go, hey, we were blessed with a lot of good Star Wars this year.
2022 has been good to us.
Yes.
So we have a lot to look forward to though in 2023.
Sure.
If you think about it, there's
for sure.
There's Ahsoka. Is the Acolyte coming out next year too? Like it's in production right now.
It's in production, maybe end of next year, but I'm not expecting that in the first half by any means. But Ahsoka,
no,
Mando, Bad Batch.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we'll hear more about Taika's Star Wars movie.
That's true. Yeah.
Like it seems like it's been a little while since we got anything about that. And I think he's been writing. And
yeah,
maybe we'll get a little bite-sized something. Maybe we'll get a title.
Yeah. That'd be nice to see Star Wars return to the cinema. And
yes,
at least have a path forward to that happening.
Yes. And I hope it comes out around Christmas time.
That would be nice.
That'd be the best.
It would. I'll take as soon as you got it too.
Yeah, I'll take that too.
But I like the holiday. Yeah. That's it. That's all the news.
That's it.
There's not much.
All right. Let's talk about death.
Let's talk about death. How about we do that? What's that segment?
More to the story. That was perfect.
I had to just get the feeling of it.
And this is not meant to be gloomy.
No,
we're not trying to bring you down.
It's still the Star Bros kind of vibe.
And if this is your first episode, we don't typically talk about gloomy stuff, but this feels like an important topic that doesn't get the attention that maybe it deserves.
No, as I thought about this, I was like, wow, this actually, again, I think I said it, like permeates a lot of Star Wars and is a big theme that follows the story everywhere we go. So it's kind of interesting diving into it and realizing how much of a role it plays. So where do you want to start with this? You came up with the idea of even doing this, so I want you to have the honors of kicking us off.
Well, I thought about this in 3 different, I guess, like subtopics or categories. One, the philosophies around death or perspectives on death that we see in Star Wars, and specifically the Jedi and the Sith, and how they approach it differently.
Yep.
Next is funerals and funeral rites. And we get a bunch of funerals in Star Wars, and they do them differently, and there's different things about them that are familiar to us, and maybe things that aren't so familiar, and we can talk about how they approach those. And then lastly, I thought about mourning and grieving, and how people go on after somebody they've cared about is gone.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk. Maybe we can start with the kind of like philosophies around death.
Yeah.
And I see you've got your copies of the Book of Sith and the Jedi Handbook. What is it called?
I feel like one of those Amazon channels. It's like,
being a Jedi for dummies.
Exactly. The Jedi Path.
The Jedi Path.
These are both books that we had covered on a previous episode.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Back in 2021, probably 2 years ago now.
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. Crazy times, but yes, it is covered in here. The one place where I thought it's covered in the Jedi Path in a couple of places. One place is the Jedi Code, actually.
Yes.
It's the very last line of the Jedi Code, and it specifically says, "There is no death, there is the Force." So a very interesting line. It was very interesting that they kind of made sure to fit that into the code to begin with.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting about it is actually. I guess in this book, at least, it was the way that, remember, this book kind of had gone through a lot of different hands, right? One of the hands was Sidious at one point. And so there's the fact that, yes, it makes it into the Jedi Code. And what does that mean? But Sidious's line is just as interesting, actually. And what the note that he wrote in there, he underlined it and said, I think I wrote it down. He said, uh he specifically said that he believed that the last son it like actually had a bit of truth in it. It's like the one line in the Jedi Code he agreed with because of the way that it's framed. It's like there is no death. Like the Sith kind of view death as something to avoid.
He likes that part.
He likes to inflict it, but he likes to avoid it himself, right?
Yes.
Because it's about gaining power over death.
Yeah.
And kind of controlling when it is given, and that it isn't given to himself. So he finds truth in that in that line, and I see where he's kind of misconstruing it. And I wonder if here's my kind of big moment of clarity, or like maybe blow your mind. Like, is that what eventually tempts some Jedi to go to the dark side, like Anakin? When he sees and reads that line and he's trained to that, he's like, there is no death, and he's like, now I want to avoid it. Like, it kind of plants that seed of doubt, or that seed of longing to avoid it, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. And it does that in minds of even Qui-Gon. Now he goes down a different path to try to avoid it. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But I just kind of had this moment of wondering, is this a line that in trying to educate actually does some harm and tempts a little bit?
Oh, potentially. And I think that's the tricky thing about having a code where it's short, punchy lines that the Jedi can memorize, but then can interpret differently, potentially. The way that I read it, which I think is pretty benign, is this whole idea. It's almost like the ashes to ashes idea of you arise from the Force, and to the Force you will return. And there's, I think, like a trust in that of this is natural, this is the process, and we can accept that.
Yeah.
And in terms of what you were just talking about, I think that there might be like an interpretation there that might be a little bit different, but also like a fear of not being myself and not being around anymore. And I think that there's a very kind of similar line in the Book of Sith where Sidious writes something about how he's going to achieve immortality. But I think what was really interesting is he put specifically in there that he will return to physical life.
Yeah, it's about holding on to mortality.
It's about holding on to mortality. It's not about immortality. It's not about transcending death. It's about not being dead.
Yeah, it's about staying alive.
It's about it's about staying alive.
That's a good song.
And
see, we keep death light.
Yes. And I was thinking about like moments of fear, because there's this question, like I started to go down this rabbit hole, and there's this question about, well, what are the Jedi afraid of if they believe that? And if they believe that they'll return to the Force and become one with the Force, what is there to fear in death? And
well, there isn't anything to fear.
There's nothing to fear in like capital D death, but it doesn't mean that anybody wants to die.
Right.
Nobody wants to rush there. And I think about all the moments where Anakin is driving and Obi-Wan is, hanging on. Nobody wants to rush there necessarily. But I do think that in that interpretation, and then maybe in the fear of death, that's where you can sort of slip down and go down the other.
Well, and it's two different kinds of fear. It's fear of your own death, but it's also death isn't something that happens to you all the time. It's what happens to other people.
Yeah.
Right. It's processing the death of others.
Yeah.
And that's the line, the great line that Yoda gives about mourn them do not, miss them do not. Like, how do you personally grasp with or grapple with the death of other people?
Yeah.
How do you overcome that? Even my wife and I were talking about that the other day. We were hearing like tragic stories of people who would lose loved ones or lose like a child, and how difficult that is to overcome.
Yeah.
And she was asking me like, how would you even overcome that? I said, I don't know, because I haven't had to do it. And I would imagine, like we were talking about, again, big Red Wings fan, and I was watching the a Red Wings game last night, and what the host of the
please tell me everybody lived through the game.
Yes, everybody lived. It was a fantastic game. They're down 4-0 at the beginning of the first period and came back and win 5-4 in overtime.
Okay, so that's a happy story.
It was a crazy game. But the commentator, Ken Daniels, lost his son to substance abuse.
Oh my gosh.
And it was this terrible thing. And we were talking about how he overcame that and how he's processed that. And he took a little bit of time off, and not much. He was back at it pretty quickly. But one of the ways that he processes is by creating a foundation, helping to fight substance abuse and disorder, and trying to break the stigma and everything.
And boy, is that a healthy way to honor somebody's
Right.
memory. And I think somebody said to me once that, when you lose somebody, they continue to be a part of your life, just not in the way that you would have chose.
Mm-hmm.
So they continue to be a part of your life in however it is that you honor them, remember them, talk about them, and so on. And I think that that's like a really healthy way to do it.
Yeah, and it's all about processing that grief, right? And how do you
Yeah.
do that? And one way to do that is by attacking it head on and finding ways to give back to those who are impacted by it still today.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to go through that or lose a loved one or anything. Now bringing it back to Star Wars a little bit, how do you do that if you're a Jedi?
It's really tough,
right?
So
especially if you're taught by Yoda, like, to just not mourn them, like that's a hard thing to do.
It's really tough, and that's like an aspirational thing. It's like, how can you not?
Well,
how can, and maybe you can check yourself in that. So here's an example from recent history, from the High Republic, which is actually ancient history in Star Wars, but recent history
in the storytelling,
in the storytelling and the releases of the stories.
Yes.
So if you haven't read any of the new,
spoiler alerts,
so there's going to be some spoilers here, but nothing massive. If you haven't,
maybe,
maybe,
right?
Maybe.
We're talking about people dying.
I'm talking about people dying. So yes, there's gonna be a spoiler here. It's from the High Republic, and I know that a lot of people are on the High Republic train, and some people aren't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But there is a really cool Jedi Padawan named Bell Settifar.
Yes.
And Bell is the Padawan of Loden Greatstorm.
Yep.
And Loden Greatstorm in one of the stories is believed to be dead.
Yes. Goes missing.
And Bell Zettifar, well, he was about to recommend to the Jedi Council that Bell be made a Jedi Master.
Yeah. Yep.
And
which was another challenging part of that, right?
Which is another really tough part of it. And then he goes missing, and Bell really feels that loss. And he's assigned to a new Jedi Master named Indira Stokes.
Mm-hmm.
And Indira is her guidance to him, I think, is very, very Jedi-like, but I think also very practical. Where she says, you have to embrace the feelings of grief and sorrow that you're feeling, but don't let them rule you. Don't let them make decisions for you. Don't let them kind of carry you away with them. Which reminds me of, I saw a video once where there's like this Instagram channel where somebody goes around, this guy asks people on the street, and I can't believe, some people kind of stop and respond to him because they share some very heavy stuff. But he says, what's the most painful thing you've ever gone through? And a guy talked about how he lost somebody in his family, and it was really painful for him. And he said, how do you come back from that? And he said, well, that's exactly it. He said somebody gave him the advice. They said, go ahead, go crazy, because I know you're going to come back. Just make sure you come back from like wherever the emotion takes you, just come back.
Yeah.
Which has got to be really tough. But he said that made him realize, like, yeah, it must be possible for me to come back. But in this case, Indira says, and I don't know what Yoda would say about her advice, but she's okay with him feeling the feels, so to speak.
Yeah. She
just wants him to remain in control and kind of not spiral.
Right. You want me to react to that? Please. Oh, I was like, oh crap, you're done.
Oh crap, you're done.
Well, you were done sooner than I thought you were. So my reaction to that is a couple of things. I look back down at my paper because I want to see exactly what Yoda said.
Wait, I'm reading the paper over your shoulder, and it just says, "Be yourself and have a good time."
That's what yours says, I thought.
Oh, you're right.
No, it was Yoda's quote. The part before the mourn him, do not miss him, do not. He said, death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those who around you who transform into the Force. What he says. And I think there's a difference between Yoda and remind me her name again? Indira Stokes, right. There's a difference. And one of them is how long they've been alive.
Oh gosh.
And I think about all the people that Yoda has seen pass, and how did he eventually come to cope with it? Like, this is kind of a way to disconnect yourself from those feelings of grief, and that's not great for everybody. And so
that's a really good point. He must be, like, when we meet him at this point, like, he must be just sort of bracing to lose everybody he meets,
because he's going
to outlive them.
He sees everyone who's born is like, I will see when you were born. I will most likely see the day you were born and the day you will die, and then I'll see it for another generation and another generation. Like, he outlives everybody, and that's he's got to cope, like disconnect from those
Mm.
feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's one of the things that is like, sorry, Anakin, you went to the wrong guy to deal with these things you're going through.
Totally.
Like Yoda's not going to be able to help you with it, because his way of coping the death of others is by not getting attached to begin with. He's always disconnected in some way.
And fully accepting.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I think Indira Stokes is a completely different story. Like
Yeah.
she doesn't live forever.
She
and
has a normal
she's-
lifespan.
Exactly. And so she has a different way of grasping the concept of grief and mourning,
Mm-hmm.
and helping Bel Zettifar. The other thing that makes that, again, we're talking spoilers, that makes Bel Zettifar's journey so tragic is that he eventually finds out that Loden Greatstorm isn't dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes to help him,
Yeah.
to save him, at which point Loden Greatstorm does die.
So he loses him twice.
He loses him twice. It's
that was a Kevin Scott idea, I'm sure.
Oh, that was totally a Kevin Scott. I mean, it was yeah, it's totally a Kevin Scott.
But wasn't he a lovely guy when we met him?
Oh, he's fantastic.
Just such a nice dude.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
What's going on in that head?
This guy is just killing all of our favorite characters and finding ways to kill them twice, literally.
It was Charles Soule that made him disappear, right?
Uh-huh.
Because he disappeared in that first book.
Yes.
But then in the second one, Charles Soule, it's really good. But in that second book, Kevin Scott's like, I'm going to make him go through grief and then make him go through it again.
Oh my goodness.
And it's so painful. That's a really good one. I like that you went to that one. I'm going to go a little bit into another example.
It's into mourning and
into mourning.
How to deal with death. Okay.
And it's Anakin.
Oh.
And it's not with Padme. It's with his mom.
Mm.
Like that one, that's another one that's a little bit inspired by its like Belle's story, which is he's mourning her loss because he's taken away from her.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can't have her in his life. And then the moment that he finds her again, he loses her instantly. And how difficult that is on him. And we see an actual funeral where, he brings back her body, they bury it, and they have a funeral for her. And Klieg's words are lovely. Like he's processing losing his spouse. But Anakin's processing something so much deeper and personal. And so there's a very different feel, I think, to like their parting words for Shmi specifically. And how he's grasping and like, let's not forget the way that he processed those emotions was through genocide. Like he dug in some dark feelings there. And it was not again, where would he be if he just had like someone to help him through that a little bit better?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And like Padme did a little bit, but that was rough to see what he had to go through.
So it's interesting to see his reaction to that, and then see his reaction to the awareness that Padme is going to die, and wanting to just avoid spiraling and going in that direction again. And I think he's grasping. I think it's like this covetous thing of like, he can't take her from me. But he's already been through a massive loss that has sent him spiraling, and I think that sort of edges him along a little bit. And I don't know how Sidious does all this, but he seems to have moved the chess pieces in the right way to set him up for all that.
He's done a fantastic job at that, hasn't he? I just got done reading to a comic series that's really really good. It's one of the Vader ones that's done by Soul. It's Fortress Vader.
Oh my goodness! People rave about that.
It's a fantastic one. And so one of the things that's interesting, we'll talk about a little bit more later too, is when we get to the Sith, is that he's basically built the fortress in an effort to try to channel the dark side a very specific way, so that he can still find Padme and be and join again with her. And it's something about the dark side of the Force, and does it with Rey with trying to find out her parents too, where it tempts you with something you really want, and then just doesn't give it to you when you get that close to it. And it does that to him.
So cruel.
Just toys with him.
Yeah.
And it does that with Rey. It toys with her.
Yeah.
Like trying to find her parents. So you can't really, I don't know. The dark side of the Force just can't be trusted. Never can be.
No. But speaking of Padme, in the comic books, there's been a lot of good representations. I think, like in that Greg Pak series.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Darth Vader gets to go to her tomb and kind of reflect on the loss, and it's really sort of like dark and sad and painful, like seeing him stand above her tomb. A quick aside, Padme's funeral was something I wanted to talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
Something I didn't expect when I was Googling stuff about Padme's funeral. She comes out in that kind of like
casket
in the
thing.
floating casket, and she's surrounded by white lilies. There's ribbons in her hair, and the ribbons in her hair apparently were meant to it's meant to look like she's sort of floating on the water,
Mm-hmm.
which I hadn't caught before. That's a very popular cosplay.
What is?
Dead Padme.
Really?
Yes.
Why haven't I seen this?
I'd never seen it before.
I'm not going to enough
But
milieus
yeah,
with Dead Padme.
there's a lot of girls out there who like have made the dress, have bought the white lilies, have put the ribbons in their hair.
Wow.
And yes.
I mean, it is. I mean, it's a beautiful.
It's a sadly
procession.
Beautiful scene.
Yeah. That scene it's always stood out, and it's really interesting because then they brought it back with Tales of the Jedi real quick and showed that Ahsoka was at the funeral too, and how dangerous it was for her to be there. But her explanation to Bail Organa and Mon Mothma were both there, but to Bail she explained like she's my friend.
Yeah,
like I wasn't going to miss the funeral of my friend.
And that's a theme that came up a few times in Star Wars, and most recently in Andor, where Andor goes home for the funeral of his mother because there's just something across the galaxy where part of honoring somebody is being present for their funeral.
And it's so interesting because it's not like they'll know, but it means something to you.
It means something to you
and to the living who know that you should kind of hold this person in that kind of respect.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've always thought, funerals are, yes, for that person to honor the person who's no longer with us. But it shows that in our galaxy, in the Star Wars galaxy, it's also about the people who cared about that person.
Right.
And giving them an opportunity to grieve and an opportunity to feel like they can show some respect and honor that person.
And it was really interesting kind of getting back to Padme too. It was like her funeral was attended by everybody that we know.
Yeah.
And I've heard this whole like it remind me if you've heard this one, but like I've heard like told a different way of like people who get a lot of riches in life and who achieve a lot, a lot of wealth, status, whatever you call it, and then their funeral is poorly attended.
Yeah.
And then you get the person who didn't have much of that in life, but had all these great relationships, how well that attended that funeral is, and what they say about that person, and what they meant to them, and all that kind of stuff, and the juxtaposition of that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's always interesting. Like which funeral do you want to have? But at the same time, when you look at Padme's, like how well attended it was.
Yeah. And
all the people that, like Ahsoka risking a ton to then just to see the funeral of her friend. And it kind of just adds another dynamic to that scene that we got so long ago.
Yeah.
When they brought it back up.
Let's talk about her funeral for a moment.
Okay.
So something that I read in preparing for the episode was that her funeral broke with Naboo tradition, because typically a person of honor is cremated on Naboo.
Okay.
And there's a cremation ceremony.
Yeah.
Like we saw with Qui-Gon.
Like Qui-Gon's. Yeah.
And that's another story. We can get to that in a moment. But they decided to break with tradition. They decided to do the procession, open casket, and then put her in a tomb.
Mm-hmm.
Curious to hear your thoughts about how Qui-Gon gets the typical Naboo funeral, even though he's from Coruscant.
Which is actually a typical Jedi funeral.
Which is a typical Jedi funeral, which is more in line. So that's interesting too.
Right.
But Padme, who at this point was no longer Queen Amidala.
Right.
Gets
she was a senator.
She was a senator. She gets kind of like the royal treatment, so to speak. But
do you think that, by the way, like, is it like our government where to be queen of your planet is one thing? It's like being in the state government, but then there's the federal government. the galactic
Yeah,
government.
right. Yeah, she might have been like the mayor of her town, but then she went up to the big city.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, or I was thinking like governor of the state of Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
and then became a senator in the Congress.
Yeah, yeah, and gets to spend time in DC and all that.
Right.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
was kind of like a promotion, right?
Kind of from a galactic perspective,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
So she meant a lot to these people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like she stopped being queen and all of a sudden didn't mean anything
Yeah.
to them anymore. She had served her people, and it was obviously her whole life. It kind of felt a little bit like the queen.
A little
Her
bit.
passing
It
early.
felt like a royal, like a very regal send off.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a reflection of how much her people cared about
But
her.
what was your question?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So something I came across here, which I guess I never noticed before, is somebody asked the question online, why does Padme look pregnant in the casket? Have you ever heard this?
I don't want to go into that.
The
I mean, the answer is, it's not like that. It's not like it just disappears right away. She delivered a child and then
Let me stop
immediately
you there.
died.
Let me stop you there.
Okay. Okay.
She
Two
looks.
children.
She looks.
Sorry.
I read, and I don't know what the source is, but I learned a bunch of stuff about dead Star Wars characters in my research for this. But I read that she was specifically made to look pregnant, so that Anakin would believe that she died not having delivered the children.
Well, he wasn't even there. Okay. So,
so that
other people would have seen it, and then
So he wouldn't hunt down the children.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know about that, but what do I know?
Again, you don't physically go back to just like flat stomach right after delivering children either. So there could have been wow.
Yeah.
Weird
one. So I read something about this morning, and I was like, huh, okay, never picked up on that. But
weird.
Here's something else I never picked up on.
What?
Can we talk about Vader's funeral for a second, or Anakin's funeral?
Yeah.
George Lucas says, well, let's paint the scene. Anakin, Luke have this heart-to-heart conversation. It is Anakin. It's not Darth Vader. It's his redemptive moment. It is the moment where he kind of fulfills the prophecy as the chosen one, defeats the Sith, and then passes away. And then we go down on Endor, and there's a funeral pyre. That the typical way of sending off a Jedi. And you kind of like, there's moments where the camera zooms in, you can see Vader's mask kind of surrounded by flames, and Luke is standing there gazing at the funeral pyre, and it's nighttime, and it's just sort of the glow of the fire and so on. George Lucas has said that Anakin's body's not in there.
Oh,
it's just
the
George Lucas has said
armor
in the moment after they had the conversation, the same thing happens to him that happened to Yoda, that happened to Obi-Wan, where he's gone.
Vanishes. Okay. Which might be important, because that might be how that be one of the steps to become a Force ghost.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Although that's not how Qui-Gon goes, and
no,
Qui-Gon becomes a Force ghost.
That's right. Exactly.
But
so I don't think it is a precursor.
So George Lucas has said that was Luke burning the trappings of what made him Vader, and sort of finding a way to kind of rid the galaxy of the dark side of his father.
I think it was also giving him a traditional Jedi funeral to symbolize his redemption.
I think it was a symbolic
thing.
He
deserved that.
Yes, right. That he was worthy of that type of recognition. But I never heard before that Anakin's body was not in there.
Yeah. But I had never heard that either. I didn't even think I read about it in some of the research I did.
I questioned. So I read that on.
But if that's coming from the mouth of George Lucas, I don't know.
I read it on what sounds like a credible website. It was called
the internet.
It was called bogusstarwarsnews.net.co.uk / George Lucas stories. Actually, I don't remember where I read that, but I was stunned, because I was like, I just always assumed that he was in there. So I don't know. Maybe dear listener, let us know. George Lucas, if you're watching, hit us up. Tell us if he was in there.
tell us what was really intended. He could have changed his. He's like, I said what now?
I know. But then it sort of like went into this debate about, people said, like, look, if you're gonna if you're going to touch up these movies, that would have been a good thing for him to put in the 90s, like put in like the fade out where like he just sort of disappears in Luke's arms or whatever. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
if that was, and so but I think it was, I think what is interesting about that scene is that it is symbolic of him being redeemed and deserving a Jedi funeral.
Yeah.
And we only had, I think, 2 Jedi funerals through the movies in the past. We had Yoda and Luke that had passed and had vanished, as we had
Yeah.
talked about, and
Right.
that's one way for them to go, I guess. Which is, I think, is just interesting. It's almost like you've decided your time has come,
Yeah.
and instead of letting your body die first, you're kind of letting yourself go with the Force first. Like, I almost feel like that's a symbol of like accepting the impending death that's to come, and just like, but I prefer to kind of go this way.
Yeah.
Is it a choice, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know more detail about that, but again, we only really get 2, and they're both the pyres, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's one more that they just added recently through Tales of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the 3rd episode, the Choices episode, with Master Khatri was her name. I believe her. And she got buried in the temple. And one of the things I really liked that was symbolic about it too was a beam of light comes up from it, and it almost kind of symbolized like them joining the light side of the Force.
Yeah,
is kind of how I interpreted it, and it was, I think, described as like a way to seal the casket or seal the tomb. But it begged the question of, okay, so we had some that we would do a pyre funeral for, and then we have some that we would bury in the temple. Who gets which one? In what circumstance?
I've thought about this.
Okay, well, let me put one thought out there first. It can't be about location, because Qui-Gon was on Naboo, and maybe they didn't want to transfer him. They went to get in the Choices episode. They went to get Master Khatri.
Yep.
And bring the body back to be buried.
Yeah.
So it can't be that.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
So I think some of it's circumstance, and we'll talk about the Qui-Gon one specifically.
Maybe it's in their will. Their Jedi will.
It could be in their will. I don't know. But in the case of Qui-Gon, I think it's very possible that the people of Naboo decided that they wanted to honor him with a funeral on Naboo.
For what he did for
for what he did for them. I think that for me, that was one of the logical conclusions.
Nice. I can buy that.
I think with Anakin,
and the Jedi were like, yeah, that's one of the ways that we do it too. So we're good. As long as we do it kind of like a Jedi style, you know?
Yeah.
Invite the council, except for Yaddle.
The right people are there and so on, which, by the way,
too soon.
By
the way,
I rewatched Qui-Gon's funeral scene. Like, little Anakin, you're literally talking about yourself at a funeral, you know? Like,
what's gonna happen to me now?
It's what's gonna happen to you? We're at somebody else's funeral. What are you worried about?
Can you wait until we move on from this
wait
moment?
Until the ashes have cooled, and then let's have a conversation.
No, that's not too bad. If I'm a little kid, I'd be like, that's like eating at my mind, you know? And Obi-Wan's like, I can buy that. I'm okay with that. You're all right, Anakin.
Poor Qui-Gon has been killed in combat, and
really, man?
And Anakin's like, sucks for me.
Okay, but to be honest, it does.
It does. It totally does. And
really
he's a kid and he's scared and whatever.
But I wrote that down as one of the things again where death is.
But nobody shushed them either. Nobody was like, shh, come on.
We are all watching this moment. Be quiet, guys. Everyone, get your Padawan in line. Well, actually, it wasn't his Padawan yet. No, but I did write down like how pivotal Qui-Gon's death was again for both Anakin and Obi-Wan's paths.
Absolutely.
And how they're both kind of processing that right there and then.
Yeah.
It's not as if again, this is one of those moments where like the death of a character has plays a pivotal role in their development of those that are still living.
Absolutely. And you know what else I came across in prepping for this episode? So the Hero with 1,000 Faces, the Campbell book that George Lucas really liked, that like he took a lot from, like the epic hero goes on an epic journey and so on. Joseph Campbell was a big believer in like the core stories that we tell as human beings must contain some type of funerals or funeral rites.
Mm-hmm.
That's core to who we are. It is any culture anywhere in the world, and sort of same thing across the galaxy. And there's stuff in that scene and Padme's funeral that I think line up like wearing dark clothes. I thought it was interesting at Qui-Gon's funeral that Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan, has his hood up. Like there's a lot of stuff you do with your clothing that's very specific. Like typically you wear a dark suit and a tie.
Yeah.
You go to a funeral here. I guess that maybe that's a Jedi thing of you put your hood up as a sign of mourning. I don't know, but
makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you cover your face with a veil, or it's kind of a similar concept.
Right.
My mind just went to something completely different. But
What's
still
that?
back to the other conversation we had.
Go ahead.
Anakin. He has to process the death of someone close to him in every one of the first.
Oh, it's constant.
Of the prequel movies.
Yeah.
He has to do Qui-Gon's and then Shmi's and then Padme's. Like it just gets harder and harder for the guy.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel for him,
And folks like Watto just keep living.
Seriously, Watto. You had to bring him up. All right. There's a couple of other moments where death kind of plays a really pivotal role. I wanted to talk about the Clone Wars, which is an interesting time. Like you think about, again, tough time for the Jedi. They're losing Jedi left and right.
Yeah.
Like they basically can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
And there's one episode with I think is Even Peel is the Jedi's name.
Okay.
Where they basically put him in lava because they have to do a funeral for him in some way, and that was the way they decided to do it. It's so they're kind of improvising or don't even get the chance to do funerals with how much they're losing them. And then Order 66 of course happens, and that's you lose a bunch more.
That's the thing in the Jedi Path, by the way. They make mention of the fact that or maybe it was on the Wikipedia page, but they make mention of the fact that by the nature of what the Jedi do, many of them can expect to die in action.
Right.
Die in combat.
Right.
Die far away from home.
If you can vanish, that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
Like Obi-Wan did.
Yeah.
Right. But then again, you have to choose it. I think that's the key part. You have to choose that this is the moment instead of it being dealt to you.
And many of their lives are taken, unfortunately, because of the nature of their work.
Right. Exactly. But again, back to the Clone Wars. I want to talk about, ironically, the last episode of the Clone Wars, which is titled Victory and Death. The combination of those two words, victory and death.
Yeah.
How when you get to the other, you realize we won, but how much did we lose along the way? Yeah. And it's something that Leia teaches Poe, remember, in Last Jedi. How many people did we lose because
of cost?
What was the cost of getting rid of that dreadnought?
Yeah.
Was it really worth it to lose all those lives?
Yeah.
Think about those for a second. So this episode is titled Victory and Death. And it's interesting because Ahsoka, she's kind of trapped between, all right, the clones have turned on her, but she's so respectful of these clones. Remember, think about the attitude of this war. You've got one side that's created droids so that nobody has to die. The other side has has inherited some clones, and who cares if they die because they're just clones?
Yeah.
There's an attitude of they don't matter because they're just derivatives of another human.
Yeah.
Right. Which is sad to say, but Ahsoka respects them. And one of my favorite things is that so she's deflecting blaster after blaster. She's not deflecting them at the clones. She's not trying to kill any of them. And then she orders Rex to use his, set his blaster to stun instead. So she goes around basically, they're trying to kill her, and she's doing everything she can to spare them. But most of them, because of their predicament, the ship is going down and crashes. They still die, and then she buries them all at the end. Her attitude towards clones and their death was something that I found really interesting, both in the title of this episode, but also just in how she realized that they deserve the same rituals and same rights to passing on as any human.
The same dignity.
Yeah, that's the right word for it. And the fact that she did that was just stood out. Just kind of shows her attitude and her respect of the clones and their passing as well. How every single one meant something to her.
I love that. And that shows a big difference between the Jedi and the Sith and how they value and honor life.
Yeah.
She doesn't spend any time trying to figure out where these clones rank in terms of what dignity they deserve and are they real people, so to speak. She doesn't dismiss them in any way. She just recognizes that they are expressions of the Force and that they are alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's enough for her. That's enough for her to respect them.
Yeah.
But the burying them on top of things is really interesting.
Yeah. The ship has gone down and you found as many as you could so you can bury them.
That's like that's true respect and reverence.
Yeah.
For them. That's deep. I love that.
Yeah, that was a good one.
The Ahsoka show is going to be so good.
Oh, I can't wait for it. It's going to
be so good.
And it's going to have Sabine in it and all the Rebels characters come back. So I'm looking forward to that as
and
well.
And Thrawn, I'm assuming.
Thrawn too.
Yeah.
We don't know who's playing him yet, right?
We don't.
Right? Okay.
I'm holding out for Benedict Cumberbatch, which I think your wife will be excited about.
He's basically come out and said, who? When asked about that, he doesn't. He's like, nope, I don't want to be blue. I'm good.
That's like when people ask Harrison Ford if he's going to come back as a Force ghost, and he's just like, a what?
Yes. What is that? I missed that part of the movie. I guess fell asleep. Yeah.
And then he says, "What are you doing in my house, Ben? Get out of here."
That's the next thing. Yeah, exactly. Show me some credentials. Were there any other a couple of the ones. Death sticks.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. Just had to throw that out there.
Yeah.
The Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
Find some other ways to get death in there.
Death Troopers.
Death Troopers. Yeah. No, I'm the real one I wanted to mention. In the Kylo Ren comic, you meet Ren, who is the leader of the Knights of Ren. And one of the things that he talks about that's pivotal to join them is a quote, good death.
What's that mean?
It means one that it wasn't really clear on that, because at the beginning, like, he's with two brothers and one of them's like, I just want to get out of here, and he starts telling about, like, well, to join the Knights of Ren, like, you have to deliver a good death, and he kills his own brother right there. This is Soul. This is dark, right?
Yeah.
And Ren basically says not good enough for that. And it was mostly because he wasn't Force sensitive or anything. He was just doing it out of like self-preservation. So he's like, yeah, that's not a good one. Like, you have to hate. You have to, like, there's got to be something personal at stake here. Like, there's nothing, like, all you want is to save your own skin. Not good enough. You know? But this whole idea of death, like a good death being what's necessary to join the Knights of Ren. And even within, like, the Sith, like, delivering death is a kind of a way through to get to, to some abilities of the dark side of the Force that some may consider to be unnatural.
Yeah. And that's a big part of Kylo's story in a lot of ways, is trying to get himself there and having to fight against the good instincts and the better side of him.
And he kills his own father in an effort to do that.
He kills his own father, and
it doesn't work.
But does it full of doubts and with that tension of the light side trying to take over.
Yeah.
So it's not enough. The act is really important, but the intentions and, like, the spirit behind the act really matter too.
I think that's also one of those places where, again, the dark side says, do this for me and I'll give you this, and then you do it and it's like, just kidding.
Yep.
It likes to do that kind of stuff a lot. So,
by the way, I saw a meme the other day, and it was a couple of Death Troopers.
Okay.
And it says, wait, we're called Death Troopers and we're building a Death Star. Are we the baddies?
Yes, you are. That's awesome. I like that meme.
Yeah.
What else? What else do we need to cover with this topic?
Oh my gosh. I think one of the big parts, or one of the best examples, I think, of grieving that we've seen in Star Wars, like sort of like a longing, painful grieving. It came out this year in Kenobi, with Kenobi hoping that Qui-Gon's Force ghost will come to him and share some wisdom, some guidance, some direction.
Yeah.
In a really dark chapter in his life. And what we see through a lot of that series is him not getting it.
Yeah.
Him kind of crying out. And obviously the presence of his master, of somebody who he really respected, admired, and loved and cared about, not being there.
Yeah.
And seeing the torment that it puts him through.
Yeah.
So I think that was a key part of this whole story. And he gets it in the end. Spoiler. We get to see Qui-Gon's Force ghost.
I like how you say spoiler afterwards.
Sorry.
We said spoilers at the top.
Yeah, we
We
did.
didn't
We
say of
did.
what.
We
Just
did.
all
Yeah,
the
just
stuff.
in general.
You've had 6
spoilers.
months.
Yeah, you've had a few months, but I hate to spoil it for anybody. But I thought that, in modern Star Wars, so going back to the very beginning, there is death, there is grieving, there are funeral rites and so on. It continues to be a part of the way they tell the story. They're making new stuff, and they're making mourning, death, grieving, funerals. Like, it's all a part of it. Andor had the craziest, biggest funeral
Oh my gosh, how have we not talked about that yet?
of any piece of Star Wars media yet, I think.
I mean, they had a lot of theirs were really cool and very like personal. Like, you were cremated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cremation happening, and then your ashes were put into the brick.
Yeah.
And you became a building block of the town. So you endured, and you had your name that was written on it, your birth date, and that just kind of regular tombstone.
By the way, I'm going to think about that every time I go to a Phillies game, because when they opened the park, you could buy bricks around, and people just wrote their names on the bricks.
Okay.
And I'm going to think about Ferrick's funerals and funeral bricks, cremation bricks.
You're going to be like, whose brick is that?
And I'm going to be like, is that him? Is that the guy whose name is written on the side of the
I
brick?
hope not.
I hope not. Yeah.
That makes this place a little bit haunted.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just that concept I thought was really cool for the whole city,
Very, very cool concept. It's so cool that you get, like you said, you get to become a building block of the future of Ferrix.
Yeah. And then add to that, like, you also I think I've mentioned this, like, you deliver a speech, which I then say is like you delivering your own eulogy.
Yep.
Which is it's like, what were, again, we talked about this, what would be those last words of wisdom that you would say if you didn't have to endure any of the consequences of what you said? And that's essentially what Marva does. She's like, she tells everyone to rebel.
Yeah.
But even better than that was just the idea that this speech was intended to have the dead lift you up. And she mentions in her speech that how she was lifted up by the speeches of those who had passed before her. And so it's kind of viewed as this way of making sure that your death doesn't bring people down, and that's what kind of mourning and processing some of those deep emotions does. It can bring you down. It can in colloquial terms, like, hold you down and hold you back from progressing. And if there's anything that they would want is for you to get over that feeling.
It's
sooner.
an act of service.
It's serving those that have to live with your
Yeah.
passing.
Yeah.
And how beautiful of an idea that is.
Yeah. It's very selfless.
Yeah.
You're literally gone, but you're still doing something to serve the people you care about.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
So I don't think there's any, maybe that's why we haven't talked about it yet, because like that's a good one to end on. Like, that was such a great I don't know, a great depiction of how to process these really difficult emotions that we deal with every day in life, right?
Yeah.
We've all lost them. Like, I've lost someone in my family this year.
Yeah.
We have to process these things, and frankly, sometimes it's helpful to go through mediums like Star Wars and see how they're processing and how they talk about it, because it helps us to process them in our own lives sometimes.
Absolutely.
So it is a dark topic to be talking about.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. But also, when you take a step back and kind of realize how serious it is, and how we've tried to make this a fun, light topic at the same time, but how serious it is. There's a lot that we can learn from Star Wars on how to process such a difficult subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really nice note to end on.
You don't have anything else you want to say?
I think that this is going to continue to be an important topic in Star Wars. It's been a critical topic this long, and I agree. I think that you can look at it and see something, even though it's a galaxy far, far away, you can see something very human in it, and you can take some comfort from it, and you can learn something from it. Whether that be about how you process your own grief, or maybe how you would like to be honored someday.
Yeah.
Something that I came across, in addition to some interesting cosplay when I was researching this, was if you do stuff like Google Star Wars death, like, you find a lot of people who want to have Star Wars themed funerals.
Are you kidding?
Nope.
I'm not surprised, but like, I didn't think of that.
I didn't think of it either. So again, maybe you find something that helps you process having lost somebody, or maybe you're preparing to lose somebody, in which case our heart goes out to you either way. But maybe you find ways to kind of say, like, well, this is kind of when I get to the end of my life, I want to be able to look back and say that I served in this way, or I helped people, or whatever. And I kind of want to, I know what I want people to say at my funeral, or whatever.
Yeah.
All these are healthy things: processing, feeling the feels, and then planning for hopefully a very healthy, happy, long life that you can look back and be proud on.
Yeah.
All healthy things. But I think we'll be seeing some more loss and tragedy in Star Wars and how people cope, because it's a core part of the story.
As long as people like Kevin Scott and Charles Soule and I'm
the
trying to
other
think
the other heartbreakers,
all the other heartbreakers, any storyteller, Tony Gilroy now,
yep,
throw him in the mix. As long as they're in charge of storytelling in Star Wars,
yep,
we're gonna have to be dealing with this.
yes,
And frankly, again, like, it is a really pivotal part of both the Jedi and the Sith, and we've talked about the Jedi and how they believe you become one with the Force, and how magical that is, how rewarding that can be.
yeah,
And the Sith are like, that doesn't sound great at all. I don't want any of that. Like, I
yeah,
just want to maximize this life. Like,
yep,
your attitudes towards it,
yeah,
right? And it's important, I think, to examine your attitudes towards death, even
agreed,
in our lives, right? How do we process it? How do we think about it? And when the people are closer to us, like, how do we make sure that we honor them, but also if they're really close, that we can get the time in to grieve as we need to.
yeah,
And turn it into something positive, kind of like the story I told earlier, as opposed to something that just weighs you down.
yeah,
So there's a lot of great, we've covered them all the different ways that you can process them, and Star Wars has given us plenty of ways to process. So
yeah,
let's take the positive way. If the Yoda way is too hard for you, you can try maybe the Andor way,
yeah,
or the Ahsoka way, whichever
or
one.
the Indira Stokes way, whatever works.
Yeah, the Indira Stokes. Yeah, all the examples we've covered today. Good topic. What are we going to cover next time?
Oh gosh, we might have done these out of order, but next time we're going to talk about
Life Day. No,
we're going to talk about
before.
Religion and faith practices in Star Wars.
Star Wars.
In Star Wars, and maybe how it's kind of bleeding over into life, or how real life is represented in some of the storytelling, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, maybe we should have done like religion and faith before death. But hey, we're winging it here.
We're just picking what sounds interesting as we go through this.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's part of the fun.
That means we're probably going to cover the guy that started the religion,
the actual Jedi religion.
The actual Jedi religion, right?
And he lives by the code, and it seems to be working well for him. So yeah. I've actually I listened to an interview with him. He's a British guy, right? I think so.
Yes.
I listened to an interview with him, and he's pretty content with his belief system.
And there's other people who are like, you realize you're basing your religion off of a movie, right?
This is, I mean, this is the reason that George Lucas is like hiding from the public. People have literally made a religion of his stories.
Yeah. Right.
But
should be interesting to cover.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to cover. But so that's on tap next time. But if you've made it this far, thank you. We appreciate you. We appreciate you sticking around. If you'd like to get in contact with us or follow us, we are. You can find our podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. So Apple and
so if you don't like the one you're listening to it on right now, you can find it somewhere else.
You could find it somewhere else. But we're also on the Broaxium YouTube channel. So our episodes are on Broaxium. But so are the quick shots that we do. Those are the comic book previews, the spoiler-free comic book previews that come out about a monthly cadence or so, all the Star Wars comics. And then we're on Twitter at Star Wars Podcast. We're on that cool new Hive app at Star Wars Podcast. We are on
about that.
Facebook. Yep, I kind of did too for a little bit. We're on Facebook. If you're really enjoying it, don't hesitate to leave a review. Click however many stars you think is appropriate. Leave us a sentence or two. It really makes our day to hear that people are enjoying it. And then if you just want to send us a message about what you'd like to see us cover or hear us talk about, or if you just want to debate something, or if you want to add to whatever we've been discussing, you can send us a message at thestarbrospodcast@gmail.com.
I think you got them all.
Okay.
That sounds right. Good job.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again for being here, for listening.
Thank you.
Happy 2023 to all of you out there.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hope 2022 ends well.
Bonne année.
Bonne année. Good job. Good job.
Thanks.
You got the bon wrong, but good job.
Bon année, everybody.
It wouldn't be French if I didn't pick on you a little bit for getting something wrong on it. La Croix. Anyway, on that note, should I wrap up 2022 for us? I should? Okay. It's a wrap on 2022.